What's up, guys? This is the last episode. We're going to be talking about vocals today, lead vocals and background vocals. I am sorry that it's taken me so long to get to this episode, and I thank you guys for just staying with me here. So this is by far the most important element of the mix. So let's talk in context here. We're mixing, and I talk about this in the first couple videos. We are mixing pre-produced worship for online church. And so our audience is the general public / congregation that tunes into your online church. And for most of the first year of the pandemic, this is how we chose to do it, because we didn't have a giant team to produce a higher quality live broadcast, which takes a lot more manpower, a lot more equipment. This takes a lot more time, but less people doing it. And so that's why we chose to go that route. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to manipulate the waves, to replace, if we have to add elements like pads and synths, to fix mistakes that may have occurred. It allows us to really take control of the mix a lot more than what we can in a live broadcast mix, which you have no manipulation over the wave forms at all. What I really, really, really want to stress is how much time and effort and focus I take on the lead vocal. And the reason for that is, since our audience is the general public or the congregation of your church or your online community, 99% of those people are not thinking of music in the same context that you and I are thinking of music. I'm assuming you turned into this channel because you have some sort of interest in mixing, producing, editing, getting your online service to sound and be presented a little bit better than what it has, or you're just starting, or hopefully this helps at all, or maybe you're just curious about how another church does it. This is how I do it. And so knowing that your online community, the people that watch your stream, mostly are not musicians. If there is a drummer watching, he might tune into the drums a little bit more and hear what the drums are sounding like. Ooh, that's a great sounding snare. And so on and so forth. If there's a keys player, ooh, I really like that piano sound. But most people, 99% of people, are drawn in, and they will judge the song based on your lead vocal. That's what most normal people, I don't say normal, that's what most people hear the most. Oh, I think that makes sense. 99% of people could care less about your snare tone, about how wide your guitars are. These are just presentation things that go on in the background that help the overall mix that most people don't pay attention to, but they will know if it's not there. However, if your lead vocal suffers in any way, tuning, timing, pitch, tone, whatever, they will notice it right away, because that's the element that they're asked to participate in. We want you to sing along with us. We don't want you to play bass along with us, unless you want to. And at your home, that's fine. But normally at a church setting, we're not asking people to come in with their drum sets. We're asking people to sing. And so this is what leads people the most. Spend the most time on your lead vocals. So I will go from start to finish how I process a lead vocal. This is the song in context with where the lead vocal sits, and just to give you an idea of how it would sound, pretty close to a final mix.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar, up from the ashes, hope will arise, death is defeated, the King is alive, he's alive.
again, we are not mixing albums here, and so the way that this was recorded was not ISO recorded. There was not a lead vocal in an isolation booth that recorded separately from the band. This is the band rehearsing a few times on a song, being familiar, getting familiar with the song, and then telling the video crew and the audio crew, which is a couple people, yes, we're ready. Let's do a couple takes on this song. And then out of those 2 takes, which is a normal thing for us, we had 3 cameras, so 3 or 4 cameras, 2 takes would give us, either 6 or 8 angles, which is really what we wanted to do, is multiply our camera angles. But audio was based on just 1 take. So we would decide afterwards which take was the best as a group. And primarily those decisions were based on the lead vocalist feeling like that was a comfortable take for them. We can fix and manipulate other little things that may have happened during the set, but I'm not going to, if the lead vocal had a great take of that song, but that same take, the bass player missed a couple notes, the lead vocal would take priority over that mix, since that's going to be the most showcased element of it. And I can always fix a couple notes on bass later. I cannot fix somebody's vocal. I can't overdub that unless I had them come in and do it again, which again, we are on a weekly Sundays keep coming. And so there's 3 songs a week that we were doing for most of the pandemic that were, hey, there's 3 worship songs, 2 takes each. We get it done in one night, and then I have a week to edit. I don't have time to bring a vocalist back in and overdub and do all those things. And so this is based on a live performance in a room, everyone together, 2 takes. So the first thing that I would pay attention and that I would do is try to get as clean a take as I can get of that lead vocal. I would position them in the room, as far as I can from the drums, depending on the set and the video and what looks, you're trying to balance all of these things. But the cleaner I can get the lead vocal, the better I can make it sound afterwards. And so this is the lead vocal, with no processing, no wave manipulation, nothing on it, no EQ, no delay, no reverb, and all of the bleed still involved in it. You can hear the drums on the intro of the song.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies.
So first, before I do any sort of processing, EQ, anything, I need a clean vocal, because I do not want to do any of my processing on whatever's bleeding through that microphone besides the vocal, which in this case is drums. And this is the intro of the song, but throughout the song and as the song grows, the bleed just gets worse and worse because the band gets louder and louder. And so you can hear during the vocals,
Up from the ashes, hope will arise.
you can hear a bunch of drums in the background, and the bass, the keys, and the guitars were direct. There's not a bunch of amps going on. So primarily what's bleeding through this lead vocal microphone is drums, and that's what I want to get out. So I'm prefacing with the lead vocal is where you're going to spend the most time in your mix by far. So what I would do with this lead vocal is I would take my snap off, and I'm going to delete everything that I don't want in this lead vocal. I don't care about breath noise. If I was ISO recording an album, and I had somebody just by themselves with a nice condenser microphone in an isolation booth, and we're recording an album, I might leave some natural breath noises in. But for this, as much bleed as I can get out, nobody's going to fault you on, hey, where's the breath noise? That doesn't sound natural. The more clean it is, the less distracting it is for the end listener. And so I'm going through these vocal lines one at a time, and I'm taking out the bleed.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah.
See that drum hit right at the end of that line. Hopefully I can get that out and still have the line sound natural.
I raise a hallelujah.
Yep, that still sounds natural. And I'm going to have reverb and delay on it, so that's not a big deal. Later on, I just want a clean vocal to start manipulating. That's all I'm trying to do right now. And so basically, I'm literally going through every line of this song and cleaning it up. That's the first place that you want to start, and that will give you the best results later. That's what I want to do. That is going to sound in context. Again, this is not processed at all, but you can see the process vocal has all of that cleaned out of it. Every single line I've gone through. This is the unprocessed vocal, still just cleaned up.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies.
Oh, wow, where's the breath noises? That sounds really unnatural. It doesn't. It just sounds cleaned up, and you're not going to be processing and compressing all of those drum hits along with your lead vocal, because we want that right out in front, but we don't want those bleeded drum sounds out in front along with that vocal. I know that makes sense to you guys. The next thing I will do is I will tune the vocal. And by the time I get through with this song, there's going to be a bunch of clips with nothing in between and my fade in, fade out onto every line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take phrase by phrase. Usually I do it like 4 at a time, or a verse at a time, or a chorus at a time. I will take those and I will bounce those into bigger clips that are all cleaned up. And then what I will do is I will tune phrase by phrase the entire song, manually tune the vocals according to how they sing, and try to get that as clean and as non-distracting as I can possibly make it. Now, what I use to tune is something built into Cubase called Very Audio. And this has the same workflow, same kind of idea and concept as if you are used to Melodyne, if you're used to graphical tuning inside of Auto-Tune. This is the same thing. And so I double-click my clip that I want to process, and then I edit Very Audio. And so it's going to take those lines, and it's going to put them into blocks that I can manipulate and move up and down. No, nothing is tuned yet. And so it is just recognized the vocal. And so when I go through this,
I raise a hallelujah.
And so what I found works is if I highlight all of the elements that it recognizes as vocals, and now I have those highlighted, and I can quantize pitch, meaning it's going to 100% tune those. Well, I can choose whatever percentage, but I choose 100% to the nearest note, and it's going to lock it into that note. I want pure pitch. I want pure notes. I don't want to hear auto-tune. I don't want to make this sound unnatural. But where it starts sounding unnatural is how flat you make it, how much vibrato you take out of it, and how fast you tune from note to note. So that is where the next couple settings come in. So straighten curve over here takes those waveforms, and I can go 100% straight, and that is auto-tune.
I raise a hallelujah.
Obviously, I don't want that. So I usually pick, depending on the vocalist and how hard their vibrato is and how fast they normally change from note to note. I usually find myself between like 20 and 40%, somewhere around there. So I'll take 30 and I'll do that. And I'm looking at the waveforms, knowing that I don't want to smash them too much. This all depends on how the singer normally sings. If they sing with a lot of vibrato, you're going to want to leave some of that in. Otherwise, really soon they will start sounding unnatural. So I'm going to go to right around 30%, and then I will zoom in, and I will take the intro and the outro of each tuned word or pitch or syllable, wherever it's tuning, and I will extend, and I will basically ramp in and out. You can see that if I take that it allows for a small section of the intro into that next pitch to not be tuned, and so it doesn't go into it super quick. And I'll usually do that right around 30 milliseconds as well, and I'll do that to the intro and the outro of each pitch change. And that usually gets me close. I'm still going to have to listen to every single line, play every single line, and manipulate. If something got tuned to the wrong note, or if something's too fast, I can take one of these individually and ramp it in a little bit more and slow it down. Whatever I want to do, I just find that if I highlight the phrase that I'm working on, do those general settings, it gets me close.
I raise a hallelujah.
So that little lick at the end is not necessarily in tune, but sometimes when we manipulate those, they sound unnatural, even though that's what it should be right there.
Hallelujah.
That sounds unnatural. So I'm going to leave it where she originally sang it and not worry about that little lick at the end. Really, we want the big, hard, longer pitches to be pure. That's what we're looking for. The little inflections that each singer does, according to however they sing, what their experience is really what we want to keep in, because that's what makes it sound natural. Now, fortunately, this lead singer has a ton of experience, been singing a long time, great mic technique, so that kept the bleed minimal. If somebody sings with that microphone, 6-8 inches away from their mouth, it's just going to allow for a lot more stage bleed, and it becomes a lot more unmanageable or hard to manage in the tuning and cleaning process. So now that we're in here, I'm literally going to go through every single line and listen to how pure it is and how natural it is, knowing that I'm zoomed in and I'm soloed out. So I'm going to hear every little intricacy and every little weirdness of a vocal. And so sometimes I'm going to have to unsolo it, see how it sounds in the mix, and see if I even notice what I do when it's soloed out, what I can get away with, all of that stuff. Try to be efficient, but also know that, keep in your mind that what we talked about in the beginning, this is what people will notice the most, your lead vocal. Take the most time, put the most effort, put the most shine on this lead vocal. It's going to make a difference.
In the presence of my enemy.
So we noticed that line's got tuned wrong.
In the presence of my enemy.
So that's wrong. Get that lined up a little bit more. We can take that end of that note down so it has a more natural curve. That should be right there. That should be that G sharp.
To my enemies.
We could probably make that a little bit more pure and maybe ramp in a little bit slower or ramp out.
To my enemies.
That sounds a little bit more natural.
To my enemies.
So every single line you are going to do the same thing for. Now those two lines are tuned. I haven't gone through those two lines yet, but I will, and the entire song, and that might take you an hour and a half to do, but it is worth it for every mix to sound that polished. And so we come out with a lead vocal, and I will take all the processing off this because I want to walk you through it and everything that I did to it. But we come out with a lead vocal.
I raise a hallelujah.
That sounds natural, but is in tune. So the first thing I do, once I have all of that done, before you start processing, make a copy of your lead vocal so that when you've gone through all of these lines and tuned them and cleaned that up, you still have a untouched reference to go to in case you need to pull something out of that you may have gotten 30 processes in and you don't want to undo it, and it's just easier to pull something, like this into your lead vocal and replace it with your old one and start manipulating just that little section. Just a little tip that maybe could save you some time later. So now with the lead vocal is cleaned out, it's completely tuned. The first thing I will do, ironically, is put auto-tune on it. One, people are used to the auto-tune sound, and I'm not talking about T-Pain or Cher. I'm talking about auto-tune puts a a pop polished sound on a vocal, whether you're tuned hard or not. Just the process, just going through that plugin gives it a certain sound that I think people are used to. And I don't want it to sound processed. I want it to sound natural, but I also want it to sound current. And so I put auto-tune on it, but my retune speed is really, really, really far down. It's really slow. And so if I tune it to retune speed at 0, that means it's really fast and it's going to sound like T-Pain. We don't want that. Not for this song. So retune speed is way far down. Flex tune is something that pretty much just gives forgiveness to the retune speed. So even then, it slows it down and makes it a little bit more natural sounding. Humanize is even more of that. It allows the inflections and the little things that a singer would do. It allows some mistakes to flow through the plugin without getting processed and tuned. And so I put that up a little bit, just depending on, that's something I play with every vocal. But I want my retune speed really slow, and I want my flex tune up a little bit. And all that does, and to make sure you're in the same key, and all that does is catches some of the small minor things that I may have missed in my manual tuning, gives it a smoothness, and gives it kind of that a little bit more of a modern sound. I'll play it with it for you.
Louder than the unbelief.
Here's without it.
I raise a hallelujah.
Here's with it.
My weapon is a melody.
I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can hear it. It adds a little bit of, I think, maybe whether you like this or not, unfortunately or fortunately, a little bit of a modern radio sound to it. And then the next thing that I do is I compress the crap out of it. And my distressor is an outboard piece of gear that I use on literally every lead vocal that I do. It is a magic box of processing goodness. If you are interested in this, look up Empirical Labs Distressor and set it to opto mode. And it is a piece of outboard gear, so it's a mono one-channel outboard compressor that I can only use on one thing during a mix unless I bounce it to the track, bounce it back in, being compressed, and then it frees up that piece of outboard gear to use on something else. Very time consuming. So I just slap it on my lead vocal in opto mode, and basically what that does, don't let the name fool you. Yes, it does add some harmonic distortion depending on the settings of the distressor, which I use a little bit, but it is not putting a distortion on your vocal like you would hear on a guitar pedal or like a saturation plugin. It's basically just putting a tiny little grid on it, and I use it just like any other compressor, but this has this magic effect to throw your vocal right out into the front of the mix. And that's what compression does. It lowers dynamics. And so there's not some parts of whatever you're compressing that fall into and get buried in the mix, and then some of it are a little bit too loud. It's lowering your dynamics, and so you can place that vocal after you compress it exactly where you want it in the mix. And if you're compressing really hard, it should stay there most of the time. And so that's what I use the distressor for. And it is literally taking like 10 to 12 dBs out of the vocal, and throwing it back in. I level it back up after that, but it is compressing a lot. I'll play the lead vocal with and without that distressor on in context of the song so you can see where it's putting it in the mix. So this is without it.
I raise a hallelujah.
And this is with it.
Heaven comes to fight for me.
You can hear how hard it's hitting.
I'm gonna sing
Without.
in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder.
With
You're
it.
gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the oceans, hope will arise.
So it's doing a lot to bring that vocal right up front and give it some thickness, give it some bigness, so that vocal holds a lot more weight in the mix than without it. And then the last thing I put on processing-wise, plugin-wise, is just a simple de-esser.
Death is defeated, the king is alive, he's alive.
I don't necessarily have any preference for a specific de-esser. I've used a few. The native one inside Cubase is pretty good. The thing that you just have to watch out with de-essing is it's really easy to do de-ess too much. And so depending on the sibilance and the high end and the consonants and S's and T's that singer gives you is how much you want to de-ess. Obviously, that's a pretty obvious statement, but just don't do too much and don't slap on a preset and just hope that it does its job and just set it and forget it, because that's a de-esser is really, really dependent on the vocalist and how they sing, and you want that to be natural. You don't want to de-ess too much because you want that crispness and that pop still in that voice, and so that's my settings on de-essing. So for sure, I am putting a giant low cut on it, more than what I would probably normally do, just because it's in a setting where there's a bunch of other musicians playing, and I want to take out a lot of that drum bleed and stuff that I don't need for a vocal. So I'm going almost up to 200 hertz there on the low cut, and I'm cutting out a little bit more right around that 300, a little bit more right around the 700. And then I'm also taking a little bit out around the 3,300 hertz range, 3K range. So I don't follow these settings. It's all about making the tone or adjusting and manipulating the tone of your lead vocalist. There's a good chance that this would have nothing to do with the EQ that you're putting on your lead vocalist, unless they have a very, very similar voice and use a similar microphone and we're in the same room, and all of those elements play into it. So this is just what I chose. I can show you with and without the EQ.
I raise a hallelujah
With the EQ.
with everything inside of me.
Which took a little bit of the mud out of it, but I still want to keep that vocal pretty heavy. And then the last thing that I do is I will use send and return effects for a couple different reasons, for my delay and for my reverb. And the main reason for it is because I want to get a mono vocal to a stereo effect. For even more, so it holds even more weight in that mix, and I can process it with a little bit more width and some depth. And I hope you know what those terms kind of describe inside of a mix. But the first thing I will do is I will send it to a stereo delay.
I raise a hallelujah.
And I made an effects track that is a stereo track, and the first thing I do on that track, on my delay track, is a big low cut of all the way up to 150, and then a big high cut all the way down to 2500. Because when I am delaying a vocal, all of those harsh T's and CH, ch, and S's, I don't want those to be delayed. I want those to stand out naturally in the lead vocal, but I don't want those delayed. It's much more natural sounding, and nobody wants to hear those consonants getting delayed. And so
I will watch the darkness flee. I raise a
so it's a dark mid-tone sounding delay. In this particular one, I have it spread left and right. Delay 1 is left, delay 2 is right. And it's just on quarter notes. It's at 100% because it's a send and return. And so I adjust the mix to this effect on my vocal track. I adjust how much I send to this 100% mix. This one's panned all the way left. This one's panned all the way right. I have a little bit of EQ and filter on there, but most of it is there on the channel. And depending on the song, depending on the feel of the song, the rhythm of the song, I will sometimes do quarter notes, and I will sometimes do dotted quarters, something in between. It all depends on the feel of the song. And so that is my delay. Always has to be in time. If I'm at 82 BPMs, I want that delay synced to the song. You'll see this little sync button. I can either sync it to the tempo of my DAW, or I can have it be at whatever milliseconds I choose. And some of them even have a tap feature on there, but I sync it. That delay is not supposed to be some weird spatial delay effect. It is supposed to draw that vocal into the rhythm and the feel of that song. That's what its purpose is. It's not so I can have a slapback or some weird delay on the vocal. If you notice, I will take off the reverb and keep the delay on. It's not that noticeable until I solo out the vocal or I stop the song, and then you can actually hear the delay. But in context of the song, it's right in rhythm, and so it buries it a little bit and it just glues that vocal to the song. Same with the reverb. The reverb, I am even more so trying to draw out that width in that space. And so this is a reverb that is native, built into Cubase, but I like the shimmery and I like the very, very long tail on a reverb. It gives, I think in this, I don't mix like this constantly, but in context of a worship song and especially a song like this particular song, your delay and your reverb are really have to be according to the song and the feel, and the timing of the tempo of the song and how that stuff feels. I'm always adjusting my delay and my reverb. Always. It's never a set it and forget it thing. And this song is more of a big anthemic worship song, and so I felt like I can get away with a lot bigger tail of a reverb and a lot more width and depth in the feel of this song without it sounding too bad. I don't necessarily mix this heavy on reverb and delay on every song, but I felt like it sounded okay in this one.
I raise a hallelujah.
That sounds like a ton when you solo out that vocal, and you can still hear it in the context of the song with the mix-up, but it's a lot less noticeable, and it gives it a lot of depth and width, and it really glues it into that song. And I'll play it with and without it, and you tell me if you can hear the difference. I know you can. This is with it.
I raise a hallelujah with everything inside of me.
Take the effects off.
I raise a hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee.
I'll put them back on.
I raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery.
So you really want to just glue it into that mix and put it in context of everything else that people are listening to in this genre. And music is art. It's whatever your preference is. But if you're going for a low-key, folky kind of living room set, I'm obviously not going to put on a ton of reverb and delay. I'm going to keep it according to the feel, the tempo of the song. And so this one felt big, anthemic. I knew the video shoot that we were shooting it in was kind of like a big warehouse feel. And so I felt like it still was in context to saturate it that heavy with delay and reverb. So that's where I sat with that one. Now, background vocals. So background vocals take the same sort of processing and workflow that I did on the lead vocal, but you can lighten up a little bit because background vocals I tend to think of as more get the crowd involved and more musical than I do showcased. And so you can tune them harder. You can clean them up even more or even less if you want to, because they're never going to be a showcase thing. That lead vocal is going to dominate the real estate of that song. And so background vocals, they're a lot of times, this is on purpose, I leave them a little bit rough and I leave them a little bit, I don't process them. I don't make them as shiny and as polished because I want to bring in that natural feel and that human feel Although I do tune them pretty hard because we're talking about harmonies and they have to be tuned hard in order to fit with a song. But as far as the cleanliness of them, they're not on their mics. A lot of them are playing instruments at the same time, and so they're not as polished as a lead vocal. And so I am not going to take the time that I do on a lead vocal because they're not the showcased deal. So this is what my background vocals sound like.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder, gonna hear my praises roar.
Here's what they sound like with the lead vocal.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar.
So it's two male lead vocals, one according to the video and how we shot it and the stage design. One is on the left side of the stage, so I pan them 40% left, and one is on the right side of the stage, pan them 40% right. You always want a little bit of spread on your background vocals to, again, separate them from the lead vocal, give the lead vocal the space that it needs. You never want them competing with it. You always want them supporting it, not competing. And so a lot of times you can get away with not manually tuning them and just putting on a much heavier auto tune, knowing that there's going to be artifacts and you can hear them, but they will never be soloed out. They will always, the more important part is that they are in tune and in time with the lead vocal. Not that they are pure and pristine and shiny, because they will never sit that way in the mix. And so I tune those extra hard. I compress them extra hard.
Up from the ashes, hope will rise.
I want them to stay consistently back. I don't ever want them to pop out and take control, and I don't ever want them to disappear to where you're like, hey, I see that person singing on the video, but I don't hear them. So I compress them really hard. You can get away with it. And then I de-ess them the same way I would de-ess a lead vocal, just according to whatever their singing characteristics are.
Death is defeated.
And big low cut and a little bit of brightness to keep them from getting drowned out. Both of those tracks get sent to this background vocals group track, which is compressed even more.
He's alive.
Because I can. It's brightening them as a group a little bit. It's de-essing again because I just don't want consonants to stay. This might be overkill, but this is just what I did on this mix. And then my delay and my reverb are heavier than a lead vocal because I want them to glue in and feel even more attached to the song and even less showcased. So that's where my background vocals sit. So in context, this is a chorus with everything processed and everything in the mix.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar.
I'll play the next chorus with full instrumentation.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will rise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. He's alive.
So that's it. Keep in mind, lead vocal is the most primary and important element of your mix. And I hope this stuff helps. I hope it makes sense. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Thank you again for just tuning in and being a part of this. I hope it helps your church. I hope it helps your mix. I hope it helps the way that you think. This is all art. It's all subjective to how you interpret it. This is the way I interpret it. I may put out another video that just has to do with the final mix and what the final mix processing, which is a big part of how I mix too, and the effects that I put on my two bus, some automation stuff. But that by far, this last video was by far the most important element of the mix. Hope that helps you guys out, and we'll see you next time.